Hello, and welcome to episode 20 of the Slava Heroyam podcast. This is once again pre recorded. This is a once a week podcast that, depending on my schedule, will air either Saturday or Sunday of each weekend. The objective of this podcast is usually to talk about the individual heroes making a difference in Ukraine. It is to bring attention to the atrocities that take place in Ukraine and to um, fight the propaganda and information war, to debunk Russian propaganda on a geopolitical level, but also at the individual level. This podcast is being recorded a little late this weekend because upsetting things have happened in America, and I've had to do some research and found upsetting things happening all over the world. But earlier, before the events of this weekend, I had already written an article comparing the transformation that is going through with American Homeland Security to the building of a secret police, and the story of how the Ukrainian, and it also covers in that article from last Monday, how the Ukrainians tore down their version of the secret police and made it a respectable organization. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and a little bit more detail in context of this Saturday's events. And we're also going to, as usual, honor some fallen from this week. And we'll have a hero of this week. Then we'll talk about a legitimate organization that you can give to help out in Ukraine. But I know that our hearts are going to be split. But what I want to do is reassure everyone that this crisis that we're facing in the United States is part of a worldwide crisis. It's part of the battle going on in Ukraine. It is now part of a battle going on in Iran, which I hope and pray is not lost, despite the terrible cost that has gone on there. So we're going to talk a little bit of all over the world in this episode. But first, I want to give a little bit of a breakdown. And, a lot of people compare what's going on in the United States to fascism. And there's a lot of great context to that. There's a lot of great and legitimate comparisons to do that because there's a group of people being blamed, an enemy being declared. But these are things that we need to realize as a people that all authoritarians do. And some of us have been imagining only one particular type of authoritarian takeover versus another. And as long as it's our side in charge, how could things be wrong? Well, for the Russians, after the Bolsheviks took over, we're not going to get too deep into history. There are better people than me for doing that. Lenin formed his secret police, which was called the Cheka. Now, let's see. I think I can do this in such a way. Here we go. So here's the first founding members of the Cheka, and the Cheka grew and expanded. And what you'll find is that they started to intimidate and kill and torture anyone who was anti-communist, and they targeted political opponents. Basic stuff. But this was an organization that didn't exist beforehand and then grew into something terrible. In fact, I have a quote here from a book. The book is called Spies, the Epic Intelligence War Between East and West. And I'll see if I can find a picture of that here. So let me go back to my screen for a moment. The book that I am quoting is called Spies, and it's the tale of the spies between East and West. And in this book, it tells a tale about how in February of 1922, not 2022, British intelligence got reports that, and first of all, that the Bolsheviks had taken over. But not only did they want to rule Russia, but that a reliable Ukrainian informant living in exile in Poland had told them that Russians were refusing to treat Ukraine as a separate country. And he was asking if Ukraine could expect the world to assist it if it asserted its right to independence. I think we all know how that story went. The world did not help, and Ukraine had to face atrocities like the Holodomor and become subject to the Russian secret police, the Cheka. And it would have been the Cheka that kept people from owning land and made the land owned by the state, and therefore could seize the farms and starve out the people. So, in addition to the Cheka, after that, when Stalin took charge, you had an organization that followed the Cheka and grew and expanded. But you have to remember, the Cheka still kind of wanted to have, and Lenin, this is where you have to judge every authoritarian by their personality and not their supposed ideology, because Lenin wanted to declare Russia a very ethnic diverse place. He was fine with that as long as you supported the Communist Party. Everybody could be ethnically different. I think at some point there was like 108 ethnic different ethnicities in the former Soviet Union. But when Stalin took control, he made a new organization, and this is that organization there, called the NKVD. And that acronym is for Russian words for something benign sounding, like Bureau of Internal Investigations or Security, something like that. But it's the NKVD. And they're the ones who they're led by, if I showed you this picture, and you didn't know you were looking at Soviets instead of Nazis, who would be able to tell the difference? And I think that is what we need to get rid of, is our tribal instinct of it's only the other guy who's going to become an authoritarian. And that being said, we also need to recognize when somebody oversteps the Constitution and then a judge says, no, you're overstepping the Constitution, which leaders roll back and step backward, and which leaders continue to double down. That's very important, and that's the type of thing that will allow you to examine, for instance, for the 2024 election. If you thought Biden overstepped for his policies on COVID, you need look no further than the Supreme Court said you cannot do this to businesses and make businesses fire people if they don't have the shot. And now that took a process to get to, but Biden never attempted anything like that again. There was no doubling down. There were other issues that maybe you can bring up, but those issues were none of them reaching constitutionality like that one did. And each president since the 80s or even before then, has done things to gain more and more power. And our society has sort of talked about presidents as if they are the ones who solve everything or fail at everything. And so that is a lack of us as the people understanding our agency. And what it leads to when you become tribal one way or the other is it enables enough power for people to do this. And that was the great Soviet purge that Stalin committed, killing millions of people. That's just one picture. I could show you that, and you might say, well, that's the German Holocaust. Well, no, that's a Soviet picture. And this picture is from earlier this week. It's in color, so you probably know maybe it's not World War II, but was this in the 80s, the 90s, Middle East? Is this in Ukraine, since I'm normally a Ukraine channel? No, this is mass bodies in Iran. People were just protesting, and you talk about 3.5% of the population has never survived. No authoritarian has survived 3.5% of the population in protest. Well, maybe Iran just did. And the way they did it is they slaughtered 36,000 people. So either we win, like the Euromaidan, with constant protest, or do you think that might be the end result? It depends on us. It depends on us being able to look at a video and determine the truth for ourselves. We're abandoning our tribal instincts as to what's going on, or who do we think we should trust, and instead be able to trust our own eyes. And when thousands, millions of our neighbors say, I think, mind you, people that were conservative, people that were Republicans, are able to look at that video and go, I think something authoritarian is going on. It should plant a seed. It should make you think. And if we don't see more people doing that, I think we're doomed. We are, of course, up against something different, in that something like 1/4 of every stranger you interact with on Facebook or Twitter or Blue Check or Instagram is a bot. We are in a worldwide assault for authoritarians and oligarchs to hold on. And that's what geopolitically Ukraine boils down to. But also we lose citizens like this to the human safari, to drones blowing up people. This is Olga, 52-year-old mother. Zaporizhia area was killed on January 20th. And this is Yulia. Olga, actually, no, Yulia is from the Zaporizhia area. Olga, I am not sure where she's from, but I know her car was struck by drones. And this is Yulia. Her and her husband was killed, leaving their daughter an orphan. Again, by a small drone attack, not a large drone. But even though, Kyiv had lost power for the longest time, the power has been back on and back off again. So your charitable efforts should probably go to Kyiv in the winter time to try to get people warmth, get them generators, get them power. But these are two more people we've lost this week. And I meant to and here's the hero of the week, Alex Petty. Alex Pretty. Alex Pretty. Gotta get the names right. Oh, come on, machine. Right. And Alex Pretty, not Ukrainian, but he's my hero of the week, because it happens here, it happens over there. And now that it's happening here, I want to show people how connected we are. And this man was just trying to help another woman from the ground. The only thing you could argue, if you really want to argue the legality of it and not the morality, is he stood directly in the street for a little bit and then moved aside. You all have seen the video. I'm not here to debate the video, but I'm here to say that whether it's this one person or 36,000 in Iran, it's the same crime. It's the same attempt. It's the same. If you listen to the Iranian speakers, and I don't have it shared right now, but if you listen to the Iranian dictatorship, they sound just like our government. All these people are terrorists. I think the Iranian government said if you are a rioter, not just a protester, but a rioter, and if you are just even trying to help the rioters, if you saw an injured rioter and were trying to help them, you are now guilty by association. You can be shot. The Iranian government was not playing around. Now, they have declared absolute immunity for our own versions of people that are just going into the street and killing people. But let's get back to a little bit about Ukraine's history while we leave his picture up there. When Ukraine rallied, when Ukraine gained its independence from Russia in '90s, they formed their new SBU. Russia also formed an SBU, and what you had was now you have a Homeland Security force that is supposed to be trusted. And it was trusted for a time, but it is made up of a lot of former KGB agents. And in 2010, the president of the time, the Putin puppet, Viktor Yanukovych, he demands loyalty from the SBU. And this is something that is recorded, and you end up with these guys. You end up with these guys, and I'll show you the SBU under Victor. So this is from my own article, and you'll notice Victor's guys of the SBU on the left, some of our ICE agents on the right. Yes, I am comparing the two. But Victor's guys, you'll notice they have a flag of who they're loyal to behind. And I don't think it'll be too long before you see ICE agents and Border Patrol agents with flags to represent who they're loyal to. And that's what the people had to come out and protest against bloggers being dragged away in the middle of the night and charged with just being disloyal. And so you're starting up the Cheka all over again. And the people of Ukraine stood up, and they lost 100 people. Thank goodness, not 36,000. They lost a group of people called the Heavenly 100 over the course of 2 or 3 months until they finally seized the government buildings, and Victor and those of the SBU loyal to him ran away to Russia. And when they ran away, they gutted the intelligence organizations of Ukraine. So I've said in a previous podcast that Ukraine took their old SBU and reformed it. It was easy to reform because it had been completely gutted and destroyed. And I'm starting to, more and more I research, the more that I will advocate to tear down ICE completely and build up a Homeland Security force that believes in the Constitution, just as our military was. Our military is going to take longer to turn into a loyalist force, but it's happening. But they're not going to start with the military. They're starting with these Homeland Security divisions, and they will have been so poisoned by this time period that they will need to be decommissioned. New leaders hired. Some people could be hired back, but Ukraine had to arrest 284 Soviet agents working within their SBU. We are going to be very fortunate, hopefully, that we don't have to make arrests like that, where where we're arresting. Um, this there's an image down here in this article. This guy is being arrested. He was a former SBU agent, but he was also a Russian double agent. And you'll notice when you look at pictures of the Ukrainian SBU, they're still at war. They're not at war with their own people. That's why they wear masks. And I mentioned this last time. Any Homeland Security organization that is wearing masks believes that it is at war. Often this is truth, and often it is a manufactured truth, or a post-truth, if you will. So the Ukrainian SBU retained its same name, its same history, and said, we've reformed ourselves. When ISIS, they had to do that because part of the whole war that they were fighting, the propaganda war in the Donbass, a lot of people believed that the Euromaidan had been a coup, that Victor was the legitimate president and unscrupulous forces had run him out of town. So you couldn't just rename the SBU to something different, because that would be part of indicating that some kind of new unauthorized government was taking over. We may face the same sort of situation in the United States, where we will defund ICE, tear it down, build it back up again, but it will still need to be called ICE. There'll be a lot of people who want to name it something different to show that it is something different, but it will take a united people to do that. It may take a united people to remove them in the first place. But from what I'm seeing, we aren't there yet. And this podcast is just going to do everything it can to make sure we are united. I hope that we can still unite against Ukraine, or unite for Ukraine against Russia. I want to put myself back up here. Okay. And one way that we as United States citizens can unite and support Ukraine against Russia is through the various charity organizations. And the charity organization that I would like to promote this week is Tip of the Spear. So this is Tip of the Spear. They remove landmines and explosive hazards. They have a whole merchandise here. They have a section for transparency. And if you go, so you have articles, 513C, and tax exemption status. They give you your tax records. These are all things I talked about last week and looking for legitimate. So here's their donation center. When you donate, you give a bunch of information, and you will get receipts for that. And they tell you exactly what your donations will go towards. So there's a lot of transparency going on with this group. And this group is connected through Blue Check. So I'll be going through Blue Check organizations one at a time, because that is a way to verify is that you're in an organizational network with other legitimate Ukrainian charities. So we also want to help people that have been affected by mining. And this charity, Tip of the Spear, is run by U.S. Army Special Forces Green Beret with 8 combat deployments in Afghanistan. So it's also veteran run. His name is so they do landmine removal, not just in Ukraine, but in other countries as well. Okay, maybe we can contact him and have him on in a future episode of the Slava Heroyam podcast. I want to back up. There was one more thing I wanted to talk about. Over Minneapolis and over and this is real important, over Minneapolis and over some of the and over LA, ICE has been supported by their own Predator drones, and those come from the Border Patrol. And I want to keep in mind that um, this guy here, Roman Hribov, was Ukrainian Border Patrol. He's essentially Homeland Security as well. And he's the one that said, F you, Russian warship. Heroes can be in these organizations, and we're going to need some heroes within them to start stepping up. But I wanted to talk a little bit about drone and drone warfare, and how I think we should approach it as protesters, because I'm going to be involved in more protests myself. But all of these locations where ICE is operating are supported by Predator drones that you can just operating at 20,000 feet. You can expect that. You can expect that they can take really good images from above on the ground. So if there were an actual investigation to some of these shootings, they would be able to review that information. And it's probably something that cannot be reviewed with the public, but they could review, hey, from drone footage, we saw XYZ. But we need our own counter drone type operations. And if you're going, and I encourage people that are watching out for ICE to have drone divisions. And there's something you have to watch out for about it, though, is that very recently, where is it? Here it is. So very recently, as of January 16th, the FAA issued a ban on drones following ICE. So if you're, they're getting ahead of things, and it's not really. So they're getting ahead of things here because they know that the next step is citizens with fleets of drones keeping track of them, because they can't even handle cell phones recording them very well, even though that they're going to have a harder time making illegal. But drones, the FAA, but they specified DHS and ICE operations. They didn't say any police force, which, there should be laws in place for that already. You wouldn't want to be tailing police officers and that kind of thing. But, cop detectors and radar detectors are legal in the United States. These guys really want to try to do things that sound rational to keep people from watching them, keep people from warning people that ICE is coming. And if they were in good faith and had the trust of the public, I think maybe that wouldn't be such an issue. So what I recommend is, at your protests, have drone operator with you. Have them overhead filming your protest. And if ICE approaches your protest, now they are approaching you and your camera. But you can't follow them around. But getting overhead shots of these guys harassing people and breaking windows and where they are standing in front of their cars could be important. So this is kind of the good trouble civil disobedience that I'm encouraging here. Be filming yourselves first from above. Have that coverage. And do everything you can to protect your fellow citizens and discourage a force that considers you its enemy. I'm not saying comply. I'm not saying kiss their ass, but I am saying do your best to show that your Constitution first and wonder why they aren't. You can even say, I'm not your enemy, but I think we're doing things wrong. I think you're being used if you're approached. And I would leave it at that. But, maybe we can get some Ukrainian advice in the future on how they interacted with their SBU, because not all of their SPU was bad, because some of them came back to arrest the Russian double agents. Unfortunately, we don't have to arrest Russian double agents, but we do have Proud Boys and other types of that nature, KKK members that have undoubtedly organized, infiltrated these organizations. And that brings me to one more book recommendation. There's a woman who is a former book. She wrote a book. Bud is her name. Yeah, Against the Wall. So let me make sure I share this screen correctly. So this is what I'll close with. Against the Wall is a book by Jen Budd. You can also find her on Substack. But if you want to know more about the history of our culture, of our ICE and Border Patrol, and how it got so out of hand, it doesn't just start with Trump. It starts way back in the 90s. It's the difference between our military that is going to take a long time before it turns against citizens, and why the Border Patrol and ICE are so quick to turn against citizens. They just had the right type of toxic climate to be turned against us. And reading this book has kind of opened my eyes to that. And it's what they want to eventually do with the military. But the military, fortunately for our nation, moved in a very staunch constitutional direction and had the support of the people. Whereas ICE and the Border Patrol were always part of being both sides' political pawn. And that created a bad relationship between that organization and society. And so now they are primed to turn on it. So, like I said, that's the final piece. And, I hope that we don't have a heavenly 100 to get things changed here in the United States. But Renee Good and Alex Preddy, those are our heavenly 2 so far. If we act together in unity, let's prevent any more and drive out the authoritarian regime that we have over us, just like Ukraine drove out old Viktor Yanukovych. And as always, so I had kind of a heavy heart in this podcast, but we'll be back to it next week. And as always, glory to the heroes who support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and Slava Ukraine. Okay, and recording.